lines. Emilia says, "But then I saw no harm, and then I heard each syllable that breath made up between them." And Othello is asking, this is the classic, male thing to do. Ask her friend, is she cheating on me? What? Did they never whisper? Never, my lord. Nor send you out of the way? Never. To fetch her fan, her gloves, her mask, nor nothing? Never, my lord. Well, that's strange. And I think one of the key things here to bear in mind is why her opinions are not valued here. He absolutely does not listen to her opinion. She very clearly says to him, the logical basis for your suspicion is rubbish. She's never asked to do any of these things. She has never got rid of me so that Cassio could come over. She has never asked me to leave to go and fetch something so that she could have an illicit sort of secret meeting with him. What this is revealing to us is that women are ignored at the expense of men in this particular case, and at the expense of Iago. Othello values Iago's opinion much more highly than he esteems Emilia's here. He is much more inclined to listen to Iago and all of his fictional manipulations than he is to listen to one of his wife's closest friends. Now, one of the key reasons for this is that there is an interpretation of Iago as being the externalization of Othello's weakest components of his identity. And that, therefore, because of that, he is much more likely to value his opinion. And when we say the externalization of the components of his personality, we mean this sort of impulsive sexual strain of his personality that he doesn't really acknowledge in his own normal day-to-day life in Venice. It's the strain of his personality that he has to repress, that sort of impulsive sexual side. And that Iago is the embodiment of this, to a certain extent, this kind of sinful behaviour. And that therefore he is much more likely then to see Iago's opinions as valid. And that's part of the reason why he never trusts the logic of this, even though Emilia has very little motive to lie to him. There's no reason for her to tell him lies and mistruths here. And she is just telling him her frank, honest opinion. He doesn't listen to that. So again, he doesn't listen to a real version of honesty, but he will listen to Iago's honesty that is based on rank and reputation and his identification of some similarities between the two of them. So there's an awful lot of irony going on in that particular moment there. Emilia again carries on here. "I durst, my lord, to wager she is honest. Lay down my soul at stake. If you think other, remove your thought. It doth abuse your bosom. If any wretch have put this in your head, let heaven requite it with the serpent's curse. For if she be not honest, chaste, and true, there's no man happy. The purest of their wives as foul as slander." So one of the things that's important to identify here is that she says, if you think other than this, that your wife is honest, remove your thought. And I think part of what's occurring here is at least her identifying that it is simply a mental construct. His suspicion of Desdemona is based on nothing other than his own thinking. And one of the most famous quotes from Hamlet is, "There is nothing good or bad in the universe except that thinking makes it so." And really, it's an idea that has been largely validated by contemporary science, psychological research, that ultimately the way that we choose to think about events is significantly more important in determining our levels of well-being than the events themselves. And that I think partly what's happening here is this externalization of the motives for Othello's suspicion, and that they are based purely on his own thinking. If you think other, remove your thought, it doth abuse your bosom. So his own suspicion is partly separated from him as a way of highlighting, I think, the fact that it is in control of his suspicion rather than the events themselves. So the way that he is choosing to think about the events, according to Emilia, is the thing that is driving his behaviour, not the events themselves. The thought of her infidelity, abuses your bosom. It violates and provokes your feelings. Further than this, she says, if any wretch have put this in your head, let heaven requite it with the serpent's curse. She means the punishment of the snake in the biblical stories of having to slither on its belly. Here, that's how she's saying that the person who has put this thought in your head, whoever has created this thought, should be punished with the serpent's curse. This is a further, I think, the direct link to Iago's satanic properties, the satanic components of this character, because he is the person, he is the wretch that has constructed this thought in Othello's head.
So could that show how she's unaware of Iago's satanic property?
Precisely. That is one of the key features of her personality, is that she sees reality very clearly, but what she doesn't see, ironically, is the way in which Iago is a kind of figurative embodiment of evil. He's a non-literal component, a non-literal sort of, almost an allegorical representation of evil itself. You know, that's one of the ways that he's consistently been read as a kind of vice-like allegorical figure. Othello says, "Bid her come hither, go." So he's in full misogynist mode here, you know, just dismissing this woman with one word, who has actually given him probably the best advice of anyone in the play so far. Your thought is the source of your jealousy, not any actions in the outside world. Here, she says enough. He's talking initially about Emilia. Yet she's a simple bawd that cannot say as much. This is a subtle whore, a closet lock and key of villainous secrets. And yet she'll kneel and pray. I've seen her do it. So although in the outset of this, I think the way in which the reference, the things that are referred to, the people that are referred to in this language, gradually evolve as you go through these 4 lines, reveals something quite profound about Othello's mental state here. He begins by addressing Emilia here. She says enough, i.e., she says things that can be taken with a pinch of salt, and that actually I'm fed up of hearing them. Yet she's a simple bawd. She is a one-dimensional whore that cannot say as much, that can't say enough, that can't prove properly what she's talking about. But then there is this segue, I think, into the discussion of Desdemona. This is a subtle whore, a closet lock and key of villainous secrets. So there's this metaphor here of secrecy being juxtaposed with this antithetical image of her kneeling and praying there. Those antithetical images, I think, reveal the way in which in his mind he has accidentally slipped from talking about Emilia to talking about Desdemona, and that this gradual transformation of the reference of this speech, the things that the speech refers to, is revealing how paranoia can warp your vision of reality. That you can begin by talking about one person and find yourself, without intending to, talking about another one, because the emotional state of jealousy and suspicion is driving the logic of his mind rather than clear thinking. And so what we're seeing here is his famous stoicism, his famous logical thinking, his famous composure degenerating in front of our eyes. Desdemona and Emilia come back. "My lord, what is your will?" "Pray, Chook, come hither." Chook is like Elizabethan, honey, baby cakes. It's a sort of weirdly affectionate sort of pet name to use at this moment in time. "Pray, Chook, come hither. What is your pleasure? Let me see your eyes. Look in my face. What horrible fancy is this?" Then Desdemona replies. I think this is quite an important, profound moment at this part of the text. Let me see your eyes. Because there is this desire, obviously, to see. You can see this as this, I want to look through your eyes because they are the window into your soul. I want to find out the truth. But then what he says is, let me see your eyes, look in my face. And there's multiple ways of seeing this as him attempting, first of all, to locate the truth, but also forcing her to acknowledge him for his racial identity. Look in my face as I search for the truth in your eyes. As I'm looking for the truth of your behavior, look at me and acknowledge my racial outsiderliness. But then also, him looking at his own reflection in her eyes. Him looking at his own identity and the way he sees it as a sense of inadequacy at that moment where he's searching in her for the truth. And the truth then really is his own inadequacy. His own inadequacy is what has driven this play to its tragic conclusions. Not what's going on in Desdemona. What's going on inside him that he is seeing through the reflection in her eyes. is what is going on in this play. It's about Othello's shortcomings, or the way he has at least seen his shortcomings. And it is not a coincidence at all that this is a moment where we have the eyes, the symbol of vision, the way we see reality. What horrible fancy is this? Desdemona's language suggests that what is going on at this time is purely imagination. There is nothing real occurring at that moment. So although the language is simple, it's quite a complex, dramatic moment in the play. Othello says to Emilia, "Some of your function, mistress. Leave procreants alone and shut the door. Cough or cry hem if anybody come. Your mystery. Nay, dispatch." So he sends Emilia off here and says, some of your office, your job as a prostitute, is to leave procreants alone, to leave breeders, people who are procreating on their own. So there's this weird, this is sort of dangerous territory, but there's a weird sense of Othello gaining some kind of illicit thrill here, some kind of weird voyeuristic sexual pleasure that's going on. Partly because he thinks his wife has cheated on him. This is kind of like a weird fetish, those strange fetish couples that like to see their partner kind of doing things with other people. It gives them a strange sense of satisfaction. I think there is an element of that in this. He's got this kind of odd desire to be seen to be breeding with this woman immediately after having decided in his mind that she has been unfaithful to him. So that's one way of looking at it. Obviously, another way of looking at it is he's attempting to compensate for his own sense of inadequacy by using this kind of overtly virile sexual language. He's calling them breeders. This is not romantic language. This is virile, sexual, instinctive, impulsive language that, remember, he has let that component of his personality be the source of his vulnerability. And he says, cough or cry hen if anybody comes. We're going to have sex now. Make sure if anyone comes that you give us an advance warning. So there's a really odd, sudden segue in this from this kind of anger and paranoia to this really weird moment of sexual tension that he seems to establish on the stage. Othello finishes that line by saying, "Why, what art thou? What are you?" And Desdemona responds, "Your wife, my lord, your true and loyal wife." And this is a moment where we have an actual variation from the use of this word honesty in the connotation and with its meaning that we understand. You're true and loyal. Both of those concepts yoked together in the version of honesty that we take it to mean. Truthfulness, being honest, being accurate and frank with the truth. "Come, swear it, damn thyself, lest being like one of heaven, the devils themselves should fear to seize thee. Therefore be double damned. Swear thou art honest." He says, come on then. He's provoking her to swear on her honesty, to make a kind of faithful pledge of her fidelity. He says, lest being like one of heaven, he means if, in case you were so angelic, the devils themselves would fear to seize you. Therefore be double damned. Be damned for your infidelity and be damned for the perjury that you're about to commit by swearing that you're faithful. That's what he means by double damned, perjury and adultery. Lying about what she's done and having done the wrong thing as well. Swear thou art honest. And Desdemona says, heaven doth truly know it. And the great tragedy of this is obviously that she is using the language that he is familiar with, of religious damnation, of redemption and sinfulness. Heaven doth truly know it. Heaven truly knows thou art false as hell. And the great tragedy here is that Othello's lens for viewing the world is proving to be unreliable for him. He is not actually seeing honourable virtue where it does exist, where it is happening in the world. His ability to see has been compromised by the way Iago has manipulated actual reality rather than the abstractions themselves. So we get to this point now where we think, well, the abstractions themselves now are not the problem. It's the fact that he has lost faith in them. He's lost faith in them because of the way Iago has manipulated concrete reality. Desdemona says, alas, the heavy day, why do you weep? Am I the motive of these tears, my lord? If haply you, my father, do suspect an instrument of this your calling back, lay not your blame on me. If you have lost him, I have lost him too. She really doesn't understand what's causing his pain here. And this is part of the the tragic, dramatic irony of this speak is that Othello is in this great moment of trauma. You can see from his language, "Oh, Desdemona, away, away, away. Oh, just please leave me alone." And she doesn't understand why, because she hasn't done anything wrong. She hasn't actually done anything, so there's no real reason for her to fully comprehend the nature of his pain. What she thinks it is, she says, "If haply you, my father, do suspect an instrument of this you're calling back, if you believe that my father is the cause of your having to return to Venice because of his opposition to our suit, if that's what you think, don't worry about it. Don't lay your blame on me, because if you have lost him," and she means by this, if you have lost his respect, then so have I. So what you're seeing there is someone completely misinterpreting the source of his anguish. She thinks it's because Brabantio has played a role in getting Othello withdrawn from Cyprus. But actually what's occurring here is something entirely different. And the fact that she's unaware of this, I think, reveals, A, her honesty, but also the distance between the two of them. Their relationship, again, is not based on that intimacy, because Othello is suspicious of it for reasons that we've already talked about. So that distance is important. The next chunk is the bit that we're going to look at closely, so I'm going to jump over it for now. "Had it pleased heaven to try me with affliction." Amazing speech, and it's the moment where it's his last real moment of lucidity, of clarity, and of verbal precociousness before the complete degeneration of his mind and his identity. At the end of it, Othello asks, "Are you not a strumpet? Are you not a cheating whore? No, as I am a Christian. If to preserve this vessel for my lord from any other foul, unlawful touch be not to be a strumpet, I am none. So if simply preserving this vessel, preserving my body, preserving the sanctity of my body and its integrity for my lord from any other foul, unlawful touch, well then no, I'm not a strumpet, because I have done precisely this." Here, her orthodox Christian chastity is what is being invoked here. The fact that she describes her body as a vessel is straight out of Christian theology, that your body is the receptacle for your soul, and that I have preserved this receptacle for my soul from an unlawful and foul touch of any other person who is not allowed by morality to have access to my body. Othello doesn't buy it, though. Says, "What, not a whore? No, as I shall be saved. Is it possible? Oh, heaven forgive us. I cry you mercy then. I took you for that cunning whore of Venice that married with Othello. You, mistress, that have the office opposite to St. Peter and keep the gate of hell." So this language of damnation that's being used in these lines, shows that their relationship is the source of Othello's reverse conversion. And there's an irony is that his own transgression is caused by this. So what we mean by this is that, first of all, we see this verbal pattern of, the language of damnation, of salvation, forgive us, you should be saved, I am a Christian, preserve this vessel. This language is fundamentally theological in its origin. But their relationship is the source of what we would call Othello's reverse conversion. Lots of the plays, the morality plays, particularly the morality cycles that existed in the Elizabethan era, were conversion narratives. People facilitating the conversion of someone from sinfulness to Orthodox Christianity. And you can see Iago as the reverse of this, the undoer of conversion. That Othello has been converted and Iago undoes it. And that their relationship is the source of this reverse conversion. So there's a great irony in this, that Othello is using this language of salvation as if his behavior in this relationship is going to be the source somehow of a continued Christian identity and salvation. But that actually this relationship is the source of precisely what precludes him from heaven, the thing that precludes him from some sort of spiritual elevation.
But don't you also think that when she says, "Oh, heaven forgive us," it can add to his anxiety, because it can seem as though she's kind of admitting to it, like, "Forgive me and Cassio."
Yeah, I think there is a sense of ambiguity about this phrase, at least from her perspective and then Othello. So the way that she reads it is obviously, "Oh, heaven forgive us. Oh, please, heaven pardon this unnecessary strife and comprehension." This wicked, sinful behavior that we're both carrying out. but he obviously could read this as an admission of her lack of fidelity and her lack of faith. He says this here: I took you for that cunning whore of Venice. And the language that he uses suggests Iago. Remember that language he uses of the people of our nation, the super subtle Venetians. He's constantly making reference to the way in which Venetian women are untrustworthy and that they can't be seen to be faithful. He actually sort of intensifies those phrases here, calls her a cunning whore of Venice. He then at the end contrasts her with St. Peter, the person who keeps the gates of heaven. That's where those famous keys come from on the Vatican. St. Peter is the keeper of the gates of heaven. And here, he says to her, you have the opposite of St. Peter. You keep the gate of hell. You are the person who has the control of the doors into hell. But what he's talking about, again, is this connotation of vagina and sexuality. That your actual genitalia is the gate of hell. It is the way in which people enter it in order to be damned. That's where some of this anger comes from. And he finishes this off. He says, you, we have done our course. There's money for your pains. I pray you, turn the key and keep our counsel. So shut that thing up for once. Stop letting people into it. There's this really kind of angry, possessive, misogynistic understanding of her sexuality as the gate of hell. So he's in full kind of abusive mode here. Desdemona and Emilia have a moment here as Othello storms off. Desdemona says, Emilia says, good madam, what's the matter with my lord? And Desdemona doesn't really understand who she's talking about. Who do you mean? Why? With my lord, madam? And she just repeats herself. Why do you not understand me? Who is thy lord? So you can see this sense of paranoia has sort of infected her as well. He that is yours, sweet lady. I have none. Do not talk to me, Emilia. I cannot weep. Nor answers have I none, but what should go by water. Now this is an important piece of language, I think, that connects to the passage that you're going to look at when you closely analyse it. Lots of Othello's language is ordered by these, what we would call water metaphors. But what she means here is I can't express myself other than through the tears that I'm crying. Nor answers have I none, but what should go by water. The only answers I have are the tears that I'm crying. But she is linking these tears to her loss of value to him, which is deeply embedded in the language of the speech that you're going to look at closely. He uses all these different, he calls her the fountain from which his value is derived. And that here, the answers that she speaks are being expressed by water. So what she is bewailing here is this loss of his esteem, this loss of value in his eyes. She's upset, not necessarily because of the corruption of their relationship, but because she is no longer being valued and esteemed through his vision, through the way he sees her. There's a couple more. The last thing that she asks us here, before Emilia exits. Lay on my bed my wedding sheets, remember, and call thy husband hither. Now this is this is where Shakespeare starts to ramp up the kind of dramatic foreshadowing of the violent conclusion of the play. Lay on my bed my wedding sheets. Remember some of the things that we've talked about with these wedding sheets of, there being the symbol of the consummation, the symbol of the breaking of chastity. She wants to put those wedding sheets on their bed because she's hoping that this will remind Othello of their idealized love. That's one way of looking at it. Also, to recall her purity. Put these wedding sheets that aren't yet besmirched with these crimson stains of my chastity on the bed. Remind him that they are as yet untainted. But of course, to go into this in quite a grim bit of physical detail here, one of the ironies of this is that she wants to lay the wedding sheets on the bed because they aren't bloody, to remind Othello of her purity. But of course, the fact that they're not bloody is really not any tangible proof of her chastity, because the idea that that would happen if she'd been sleeping with someone else numerous times would mean that they wouldn't be bloody. So actually, sort of unwittingly, she's providing further proof for his suspicion. The fact that they're not tainted by this kind of virginal blood suggests then that she's already done that somewhere else. What they also function as is an example of foreshadowing. They become a shroud. This is how she dies. She's killed in her own bed and then effectively wrapped in her still unconsummated wedding sheets. And that the wedding sheets themselves now become a symbol of that approaching, encroaching mortality. And that at this moment in time, in history, this was seen as quite a fashionable thing to do, to be buried in your wedding sheets, because it was a suggestion, I think, of a kind of rebirth, that you could become this kind of youthful woman again at the moment of death if you were buried in your kind of virginal wedding sheets. I presume not bloody ones. Good Lord, you end up talking about such disgusting stuff. Iago returns, just when you think you've seen the back of him for a little while. Here he is, he's back again. "What is the matter, lady?" Emilia says, "Alas, Iago, my lord hath so behawed her, thrown such despite and heavy terms upon her as true heart cannot bear." "Am I that name, Iago?" Iago plays dumb here. "What name, fair lady? Please, tell me." "Such as she said my lord did say I was. He called her whore, a beggar in his drink. Could not have laid such terms upon his callet." Now, one of the key things I think here is the contrast between Emilia and Desdemona. If you look at this is kind of what happens when you are a teacher and you ask a kid to read a rude bit of a book out. They get squirmy and uncomfortable. "Such as she said my lord did say I was." She cannot bring herself to say the word whore. Emilia can, very quickly. He called her whore. Come on, Desdemona, get on with it. There's a real contrast being established between these two characters here, and I think Desdemona's sort of idealized virtue, her idealized chastity, and Emilia's willingness to be frank and honest about reality. Emilia is, at this moment, the character who has the good version of honesty that we trust and understand and know in the 21st century, of being frank about the truth. But, of course, the fact that Desdemona can't do this allies her with this sort of mistaken vision of reality, of seeing the world through these over-idealizations. "Oh, he called me whatever she said that my lord said I was." Just say the word whore, is what Emilia says. He called you a whore. And, as if that wasn't enough, she's already mentioned this. "My lord hath so behawed her. He has made her seem like a whore." When she says, "A beggar in his drink could not have laid such terms upon his callet." A callet is the basest kind of prostitute, the ones that the poor people would use. And that's why she uses this description here. A beggar in his drink, a homeless drunk, couldn't have criticized and laid more scornful terms on the basest form of prostitute. This is not a woman that dances around the subject. She will tell you how it is. And that's where the irony comes from, that she can't see that Iago is evil. She has a clear vision of reality about almost everything else, but cannot understand Iago's true figurative evil. A little further, Iago unconvincingly tries to play the shoulder to cry. "Do not weep, do not weep. Alas the day." The lines are so bad, they sound like they've been written by a kind of, a middle school student. And they're supposed to express his discomfort at this kind of fabrication. "Oh, I can't be the comforting man here. I'm useless at this." Emilia says, "Hath she forsook so many noble matches, her father and her country, all her friends, to be called whore? Would it not make one weep?" But again, what they're drawing attention to are all the sources of his paranoia. Has she turned down so many noble white Christian Venetian suitors, of her father and her country and her friends, to be called a whore? Has she not put herself through enough suffering by marrying a black man here and allying herself to an ethnic outsider, by turning down identification with someone through genealogy and family link, through racial and national identity, and through close friends and close circles of power?
So this goes into his suspicion.
Well, yeah, but not necessarily to suspicion, because at the moment he's not even at the scene. But at this moment in time, it's revealing to us the prevalence of these opinions that give us a clear insight into why Othello is so desperately clinging on to that abstract source of his identification as a converted Christian, as a sort of a de facto white man, as a military commander, as someone deeply enmeshed within the social structures of Venice, clings onto it for dear life, because without it, he's just a black man who is in the wrong place at the wrong time. He has to have all of those things. He has to believe in them. Here is the great irony, though, for Emilia and Iago. It is my wretched fortune, Iago says, beshrew him for it. How comes this trick upon him? Desdemona, nay, heaven doth know. Again, she's in the realm, oh, well, only heaven knows. And Emilia says, no, rubbish. I will be hanged if some eternal villain, some busy and insinuating rogue, some cogging and cozening slave, to get some office have not devised this slander. Let's not think about this in terms of fate and damnation and virtue. Some git has made this lie up and told it to Othello. Of course, the huge irony is that it is her own husband. But she is the first person to suggest this to him, that this story that he believes is not real. It's made up. It's some lying swine has made this up and lied to him and created this mistaken vision of reality. I will be hanged foreshadows what happens to Emilia. She dies, she's killed by Iago for unmasking him. If some eternal villain, a devil, a vice-like figure, this is Iago that she's referring to, and she doesn't even know or appears not to. Some busy and insinuating rogue, some occupied and criminal kind of person who suggests all these things to others. Some cogging and cozening slave, and this means some kind of cheat and some deceptive slave, to get some office, to get Cassio's job, have not devised this slander, have created this.
Why doesn't Othello just tell everyone that Iago was the one who said?
Why doesn't he? Because of the shame.